I grew up in Denton, Texas. I still got family there too. It's one of those places that people either know because they went to college there or because they've heard the name on a ghost tour podcast. It's old, really old for Texas, with roots that stretch back into the 1800s. The town's got charm, sure, live music, good barbecue, and old brick buildings that moan when it storms, but it also has this strange undercurrent. Ask anybody local about weird stuff and eventually they'll bring up that bridge. Officially, it's called the Old Alton Bridge, but nobody that I know even calls it that. Everybody just calls it Goatman Bridge. The iron frame is rusted and bent in places, and when the wind picks up just right, it groans like something's dying. The boards creak when you walk on it, as if somebody's coming up behind you. And the stories, man, those stories really never stop. Everybody's got a cousin or a friend who swore that they saw something there. Crying babies, hanging shadows, red eyes glowing in the brush. But the big one, the legend that gave the bridge its nickname, is about the Goatman. Now, there's a few versions of the story depending on who you ask. The most common one says that back in the day, a black goat farmer lived near the bridge and was well known around town for selling meat and milk. One night, some good old boys didn't like him being around, so they dragged him out to that bridge and hung him from the iron trusses. When they came back to cut him down, the body was gone and just vanished. And ever since then, people say he's out there, watching and waiting. Head of a goat, body of a man, and angrier than hell. Myself, I never really put much stock in these legends, at least not like that. It sounded like a spooky story that had been stitched together from guilt and time. But the bridge itself did feel strange. We used to ride our bikes out there when I was a kid in the early 2000s, way back before smartphones and social media ate up our brains. It was a 30-minute pedal from my house, but we made the trip all the time, especially in the summer. Nothing to do in Denton when you're 12 except get sunburnt and scare each other. We treated Goatman Bridge like our old haunted clubhouse. We thought we owned it, but that place had its own rules. And on one of those nights, it made them very clear. That summer, we were completely obsessed with the place. Me, Ricky, Ben, and George. 4 dumbass kids with far too much time and not enough fear. We knew every inch of that bridge too. Knew which boards would dip when you stepped on them. Which parts of the iron frame had names scratched in it from decades ago. Knew where the trail on the far end broke into the woods and led down to a creek. We'd go out there after school, on weekends, whenever. Most kids don't really mess with bridges after dark, but we thought it made us tougher. Sometimes we'd fake Goatman sightings to freak out other middle schoolers, toss rocks into the trees, make goat noises. George was really good at it too. But on one night in mid-July, still hot even after the sun went down, we decided to up the ante. No bikes, no flashlights, no phones, just us walking in, Billy Badass style. We figured the darkness would make it scarier, maybe even let us see something real this time. That was the kind of logic a 12-year-old boy really operated on. Dumb courage. We met up around 9 and snuck out to the bridge. It was quiet as church, no bugs, no frogs, just the wind rattling leaves and the occasional groan of the bridge when it settled under its own weight. We made our way across slowly, boards squeaking under each one of us. On the far end, we found this trail and followed it into the trees. It was darker there, pitch black even. We kept walking, cracking jokes, throwing little jabs to keep ourselves from getting too spooked. And then we heard something, a noise from behind us. Almost sounded like footsteps, slow ones. We all froze. Ricky turned around and whispered, "That wasn't one of us, was it?" "No," George said. Ben then leaned in. "Maybe it's just more kids. Let's scare the hell out of them. What do you say?" We crept back around the trailhead, staying low and barely even breathing. But as we neared the brush at the edge of the woods, we saw something that shut us all up at once. There were people on the bridge, not kids, adults, 7 or 8 of them, all moving slow and creepy. A couple held candles that flickered with this reddish-orange glow. One of them had a bundle of sage or something like it, smoke trailing off it and curling into the dark. No mask or hoods. Some of them had paint on their faces though, white streaks down their cheeks, black circles over their eyes. The paint looked super sloppy, almost childish, which somehow made it worse. They weren't talking, just this low humming noise, And it wasn't a tune, more like a drone, a sound that vibrated in the chest more than in your ears. We dropped down into the brush and watched, too afraid to run. The bridge was the only way home, though. Ben whispered to us, "Is this like some sort of cult?" But nobody answered. One of them then knelt down, began dripping wax onto the wood in wide looping patterns. Another poured something from a dark bottle over the side into the creek. The smoke from the sage got thicker and started to stink, like burning hair or old meat. The humming then got louder, and words started to come from it. And then, off to the left, we heard this squealing noise. It was a high-pitched and panicked noise, an animal clearly, but it didn't sound wild, it sounded trapped. Another squeal, then a scream, and then the sound of something wet and final, a gurgle, a snap, and then silence. We lay there frozen, sweat pouring down our necks even though the air around us felt cold. George covered his mouth like he was about to puke, and Ricky just kept shaking his head. "They just killed something. They just killed something," he whispered. And yeah, they definitely did. Then came the splash. From the middle of the bridge, it was heavy, like somebody dropping a bowling ball into the water below. We didn't want to move, we didn't want to do anything. We were stuck. The bridge was the only way back home. The long way around meant 3 hours of walking through woods and neighborhoods that we didn't know. So we just waited. The ritual dragged on. They started chanting and real words came out this time, no longer just a hum. Something guttural. I couldn't make sense of the language, and maybe it wasn't even one. One of them started banging a stick against the side of the bridge like a drum beat, and that's when I snapped. I couldn't take it anymore, the smell, the sounds, the way the shadows danced in and out of the iron frame. I picked up a rock, just some softball-sized chunk of old concrete, and hurled it high and hard over the trees. It landed on the far side of the bridge, smacking the metal with this loud clang. Instantly, the chanting stopped. They all looked up, and then they screamed. Not in anger, in terror. It was this jarring animal sound. One of the women dropped her candle, another stumbled backwards and nearly fell off the bridge. I couldn't believe how scared they actually just got. Then they ran, scattered into the trees, away from the trail, away from the bridge, screaming and scrambling like something was chasing them now. We waited a full minute, maybe two, then Ricky said, "Let's go." And we ran. Crossed the bridge in seconds, didn't even look down, didn't stop to breathe until we hit the main road. Now, I think that should have been the end of it, right? But just as we were about to hit the corner that led back into the neighborhood, we heard a voice. And it wasn't words, just this one long, horrible sound. It was deep, like ruptured pipes, and it was coming from the woods behind the bridge. We didn't stop. That sound, it hit something inside me that I didn't even know was there, like a survival switch that I could not control. I turned and ran faster than I ever had in my entire life. The others followed behind without another word. Our sneakers slapped up against the asphalt, lungs were heaving, hearts were pounding like we were gonna drop dead right there. Behind us, branches cracked, brush split. Something was moving through those trees, not stomping, not clumsy, just fast. Another scream rang out behind us, closer now, lower and louder. God, it was right behind us. George tripped and I saw it happen in slow motion, the way he hit the dirt and then rolled. Ricky doubled back for him, yanking him up by the collar. George's knee was bleeding, but it didn't matter. He ran with a limp like his life depended on it because, well, it did. The woods thinned, but it didn't feel better. Every shadow looked and felt wrong. We heard rustling high up, inside the trees. Something was moving above us or beside us, or maybe both. I honestly didn't want to know. "Don't look back," I shouted, breath tearing through my throat. But of course, we all did. And I think we saw it just for a second, silhouetted in the tree line behind the bridge. Broad shoulders, long limbs, horns that curved backwards, eyes like coals in the dark, and legs bent the wrong way. It didn't follow. We broke through the last of the trees and hit the edge of the neighborhood like bullets. Streetlights, sprinklers ticking, a world that felt fake now, safe but unearned. We didn't stop until we hit my porch, and felt the door slam behind us. Nobody said anything. Nobody spoke. Now, we don't know what we saw. It probably was just shadows from the streetlights, or maybe one of those cloaked weirdos through the trees. Whatever the case was, we never went back or messed with that bridge ever again. I never really minded graveyards. Some people get real bent out of shape about them though, like they expect a bony hand to reach up, grab their ankle, every single time they step off the path. But to me, they're just land with names and memories built inside them. Quiet, peaceful, mostly. Dead folks don't really talk back, do they? And I guess that's really more than I can say for most living people. I got the job at Old Independence Cemetery through a buddy of mine named Glenn. He'd been working maintenance out there for a few years now and told me they needed another yard hand. Said the pay was fairly decent, full benefits too, paid time off, the whole deal. I was in between gigs and tired of warehouse work, so I put in for it and got hired the next day. Didn't really take that much. Old Independence is the oldest cemetery in Texas, or at least that's what the brass says. Founded in the 1820s, and you can really feel how old it is when you walk the grounds. Some of the stones are nothing more than jagged stubs now, worn down by rain and sun until they look like broken teeth in a long row of skulls. The newer plots are cleaner and neater, but there's a lot of weird ground in between them. I like the job. Yeah, it was hot. Yeah, it was heavy. Digging plots ain't really easy, especially in the dead of summer, but I like that solitude. I like driving that backhoe at dusk with a cold drink waiting in the truck. Some days I barely even saw anybody else. Just would nod to Glenn or the occasional funeral director passing through. Of course there's weird stuff, always is in places like that. Sometimes you'd find dolls left by headstones with no names. Sometimes flowers would appear on graves that hadn't been touched in 20 years. Once I saw this stray dog standing perfectly still on one of the older slave burial mounds, just staring off into the woods. Most days it was normal work, lawn care, maintenance, plot digging. Until that night. That night I stayed late to finish these two graves and ended up seeing something that I still can't explain. Something that's stuck in my head every single time I close my eyes and picture that old cemetery. I thought the dead didn't move. It was a Friday night when it happened, summer, late June. Hot as hell even after sundown. I was scheduled for overtime since 2 back-to-back burials were coming up the next morning. Glenn had already started the plots earlier that day, scraped them out with the backhoe about 5 feet deep, but I needed to finish the depth, clean the edges, and make sure it was square. I didn't mind working late, fewer distractions. The air cooled off just enough that the cicadas got loud and the sun dipped below the oaks. It felt like being alone inside this pocket of Texas history. Just me, the hum of the insects, and a bunch of stones with names nobody even said out loud anymore. I parked the backhoe by the first hole, climbed down with my shovel and headlamp. There was only a few floodlights on that night, one tall pole near the main road and 2 smaller poles rigged to the motion sensors on the storage shed. Just enough to see what you're doing, but not enough to shake off the shadows. I had some additional pop-up lights and flashlights, but it was still darker than a coal miner's asshole out there. I got to digging. Shovel work ain't glamorous, but there's something kind of meditative about it though. Repetition, sweat, progress. After about 40 minutes, I had the hole nearly finished. I set the shovel down, climbed out to walk the perimeter, just to make sure the measurements were still good. And that's when I took notice of him. Out past the fresh plots, maybe 50 feet away, standing in the middle of the old stone section, this patch of ground from the 1800s where the markers are mostly rock and rebar, he was just standing out there, not moving or even facing me. I stopped cold. My first initial thought was, okay, it's just a visitor. It happens a lot more often than you think it would. Grievers will come by late, get drunk and wander around. But something about this guy was just off to me. He didn't have that kind of posture. He wasn't slouched or slow. He was standing upright, straight, calm, wearing dark clothes, maybe this long coat or some kind of jacket. As I looked at him, he raised his hand and waved at me. Not a slow, friendly wave either, just one wave, like he was confirming that I saw him. I stood there by the backhoe waiting for him to approach me, figured I'd say something, let him know that the place is closed, but he still didn't move, at least not at first. Then he slowly started walking toward me. I squinted, stepped toward the floodlight, figuring if he was going to come up, he would do it with me visible and ready, but once I hit the light and turned back toward where he'd been, he was gone. No crunching of gravel, no rustling through the grass, just gone. I stood there for a while waiting and listening. Again, you get used to weird out here, but this was something completely different. No sound, no wind, not even the bugs anymore, just this heavy stillness. Eventually, I shook it off. Maybe I was tired and just imagined him. Long hours, heat, darkness, it will mess with your head eventually. I got back in the hole, finished digging, and started cleaning up. I'd say 10 minutes later, I set the shovel down again and reached for the ladder to climb out. And there he was again, standing at the edge of the grave, looking down straight at me. Same man, same coat, same expression, which was none at all. I yelped, tripped over the shovel, and fell hard on my back. Dirt flew up in my face, and when I scrambled to sit up, bracing for a boot or a blow, nothing. The edge was empty. I spun in circles, half expecting him to be behind me now, but there was nobody. No footsteps, no whisper of any kind of motion. I stayed in that hole for a solid 10 minutes, heart pounding, flashlight shaking in my hands. I didn't want to climb out. I didn't want to see him again, closer this time potentially. And nothing happened. Eventually, I pulled myself up, knees stiff and nerves shot. I grabbed my tools and got ready to leave. But as I went back to step into the backhoe, I caught something out of the corner of my eye, movement across the cemetery, maybe 2 or 3 rows of headstones deep. A light. It was faint at first, then brighter. A flashlight, sweeping left to right, pausing and then sweeping again. Someone was out there walking, and not the man I'd seen. It was a different shape, moving a lot more casual. Then a second light. Then came a third. 3 beams now weaving between the stones. I killed my own headlamp and just stood there in the dark. Grave robbers. At least that's what I figured. It's rare, but it does happen. The wrong people get word that somebody old and rich is buried with jewelry or keepsakes, and they start getting ideas. I crouched down with my phone in one hand, flashlight in the other, and started moving. I followed the lights carefully, making sure to stay behind each of those taller stones. I didn't want to spook them, not yet. I needed to see what they were actually doing first, get proof, something to tell the police. They were grouped around a plot that I recognized, one that we'd filled maybe 3 or 4 months back. An older woman lived on a ranch just west of town. No kids, no spouse. Her family had gone all out on the headstone. I remember the brass details of the velvet liner inside the coffin. Rumor was she had gold rings buried with her. As I got closer, I heard voices now, nervous though, arguing in whispers. One of them had a shovel in the dirt already. I raised my phone, ready to take a picture. But then one of them turned, caught the light from my phone, maybe saw the glint of metal from my belt or something, and shouted, "There's somebody there!" All 3 of them turned to me. I tried to backpedal, fumble for the light, but one of them was already charging. "Hey, get the fuck out of here!" I turned to run, but didn't make it far. A crack hit the side of my head, pain exploding behind my eye. I dropped to the ground, vision spinning, hearing a whine sound like a tuning fork inside my skull. Boots then pounded the dirt, then faded. A roar of an engine somewhere off in the dark outside the cemetery fence. And then silence. I lay there in the cold grass, bleeding into the roots, hoping I wasn't about to be buried in a place that I worked. When I finally came to, everything was still. My head was pounding, hot and wet from where that shovel had caught me. I rolled onto my side and spit blood into the grass. The flashlight was gone, my phone too, and I could still hear the engine echoing faintly in my skull, long gone by now. I pushed myself up to my knees, dizzy as hell, and sat there under the stars, just breathing and waiting for the world to stop tilting. Eventually, I limped back to the backhoe, hit the emergency beacon mounted on the dash, one of those red strobe lights that you only flip when something's gone really wrong. It sent a signal straight to the office and to Glenn's phone. 10 minutes later, I saw headlights at the front gate. Cops came, Glenn came too. They found me leaning up against the machine, head wrapped in a dirty towel from the toolbox. I told them what happened, left out the part about the man by the grave though. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I didn't know if they would. They searched the grounds and found the half-dug grave and fresh boot prints all around it. One of the officers looked at the hole and said, "They were close." They dusted what they could, took statements, and snapped photos. I got a ride to the ER and 5 stitches over my right eyebrow. Cops, of course, never found the guy, never got a license plate, never recovered my phone. The grave got filled again the next morning like nothing had even taken place. I still wonder who that man was, the one who waved, the one who stood over the hole like he was measuring it for me. There's a part of me that wonders if he wasn't trying to scare me but warn me, or maybe he was just watching and waiting, making sure the ground stayed fed. I ended up quitting that job 2 months later, told Glenn that I appreciated everything but the job just wasn't for me long term. He didn't argue. I never lived in Texas, never wanted to either. Nothing against the state itself, it's just not for me. Too much land, too much sky, too many places where you can scream your lungs out and nobody would hear you for 50 miles. That being said, I've driven through it more times than I can count. My job used to always have me running overnight hauls through the lower south, mostly oil field logistics, some warehouse inventory, sometimes even deliveries. I had a good enough car, kept my gas topped off, and stayed pretty caffeinated. You get kinda used to that grind and you almost build a rhythm. But one night, one stretch of road out in East Texas, I still occasionally think back to. That trip put something in me that I still haven't been able to shake. It was fall, and I remember it was still hot as shit outside. The road in front of me was bone dry, but the air had that weight to it, like it wanted to thunder later. I was on some county highway, winding through the middle of nowhere. No towns for 20 miles in either direction. No cell reception either, just power lines, barbed wire fences, and the kind of darkness that you don't get near any kind of city. I always hated East Texas too, the openness, the isolation, the way it feels too quiet even when you're blasting music in your car. I've heard all those stories too, cartel stuff, backwoods cults, cryptid sightings, dead-eyed guys in pickup trucks who don't slow down for anything. And I used to think all of those stories were bullshit, mostly. But out there driving alone with no lights around you, your brain kind of gets loud. You start imagining headlights in the trees or shapes moving just beyond the range of your brights. You get itchy. I'd always tell myself, you're being paranoid, it's just another lonely road, and you got work in the morning. But on that night, I got stranded, and it nearly got a lot worse than that. I had around 40 miles left on that leg of the drive. I've been making good time too, cruising at 60 with nothing ahead of me but double yellow lines and that pale stretch of stars overhead. Not another single car on the road either, and I didn't mind. It was late, maybe 1 in the morning, but I wasn't tired. What I was though, was needing to piss something fierce. I'm sure you know, it's not unusual. Long drives, lots of gas station coffee. I wasn't expecting a bathroom anytime soon, so I'd pulled over plenty of times before, done the same thing. I saw a decent shoulder ahead, little gravel turnout just past a curve. It looked flat enough, didn't dip too much toward the ditch, and there weren't any headlights behind or in front of me. I rolled off through the car and park and stepped out. The air hit me, cold and damp, and for some reason I remember that part very clearly. I stood near the back of my car, just behind the bumper, my boots right on the white painted line. I thought to myself, probably gonna get arrested pissing this close to the road, but I didn't care. It was dead quiet out there, and I mean dead quiet, not even bugs. As I finished up and put my pork sword back in my pants, I heard something. Not much of one, just a whisper of a sound off to my right, somewhere past the ditch. I turned my head and squinted into the dark, expecting maybe an armadillo or some kind of roadkill scavenger. But there was nothing, no movement. And then that's when the car came. It exploded around the curve, silent at first, no headlights, and I mean none. Just this massive black shape rocketing forward out of nowhere. I saw the blur of it, then the noise caught up, engine screaming, tires chewing up the gravel. I jumped back, heart slamming into my ribs. It missed me by inches, and I'm talking inches. If I hadn't moved, it would have nailed me or my driver's side door or both. It shot past and disappeared around the next bend like it had never even been there. I stood there shaking, genuinely shaking, not startled but frightened. I zipped up, hard hammering, trying to process what the fuck that was about. My first instinct was to call the cops, report it. But I didn't have a plate, barely had a description. I was in the middle of East Texas with no service anyway, so. It was wild though. I had to stand there for a while just to process it all. A couple of inches in the wrong direction, they'd been dragging my body out of the bar ditch in the morning. I didn't let it go, so I just walked a few paces from the shoulder, pulled out my vape and looked up at the sky. Still no bugs, no frogs, just the wind through the dead grass and distant trees. Then I heard it again, that same noise, soft at first like gravel settling. I turned, headlights off again. Another car was coming fast. Same bend, same curve, but this time it wasn't gonna miss. I watched frozen as the vehicle came straight from the dark and slammed full force into the back of my car. The sound was massive, a blast of glass, steel, and screaming rubber. My car rocked up on its two wheels and slammed back down hard. The airbags didn't deploy. I was shocked about that. I'd have died if I were inside that car. I was still standing there, a dozen feet away, stunned, trying to make sense of what just happened. Smoke started pouring from the front end of the other vehicle, an older model sedan, looking like maybe from the early 2000s, a Buick. The hood was crumpled in like a beer can, steam hissing from the radiator. My taillights were still blinking, one hanging loose from the wreckage. I ran toward it, yelling, trying to see what was inside, and I couldn't believe this had actually happened. I thought maybe it was that same guy who almost hit me minutes before, but when I got to the driver's side window, I saw something worse. Kids. There were 3 of them, maybe 17 or 18 tops, all slumped inside, dazed. One of them was leaned halfway out the window, blood in his mouth. The driver looked barely conscious. The third was rocking back and forth in the front seat, mumbling something I couldn't quite make out. I pulled open the door. "Hey, are you guys okay? What the hell were you even?" The chemical stink hit me hard, not booze, not weed, paint. There were spray cans all over the floorboard, empty bags, soaked rags. One of the kids had silver across his nose and lips. They were huffing, high as hell. "Jesus Christ," I muttered. "You could have killed somebody." The driver groaned. "Oh, fuck. What happened?" "You slammed into my car, that's what, with your lights off. You trying to get yourself killed or what?" One of them started crying and another dry heaved. I pulled my phone out and found that I had a single bar of service now, just enough to call it in. And also, more importantly, enough to realize how lucky I was that I wasn't inside my car. The cops showed up maybe 20 minutes later, long after the adrenaline had already worn off. I stood on the shoulder with my hood up, vape dead, arms crossed tightly against the cold. My car looked like somebody had taken a wrecking ball to it. The trunk was crushed, rear axle probably cracked, glass everywhere. That old Buick was still hissing. The kids were a complete mess. One was unconscious by the time the first deputy arrived. EMTs had to drag him out on a stretcher. Another was still sobbing and shaking uncontrollably. The driver wouldn't stop mumbling that same phrase over and over. "I didn't see it. I didn't see it. I didn't see it." Finally, they sedated him. The deputy took my statement, asked me to walk through what happened twice. He was calm and professional, didn't seem really that surprised by any of it. When I mentioned the first car, the one that almost hit me, he raised an eyebrow but didn't say much, just jotted it down and moved along. "Kids out here do this kind of thing often or what?" I asked him. He gave me a little nod. "Yeah, more than you'd think. paint, gas, whatever the hell they can get their hands on. Once they're cooked, they go joyriding. A lot of them turn their headlights off, think it's funny, or they think nobody will see them if they're high as hell, flying off through the dark. I glanced back at my car. They could have easily killed me. Yeah, he said. It could have been a lot worse though. Seen far worse myself. A tow truck came around 3, loaded up my car like a carcass. Driver was this old guy with nicotine fingers and a spit bottle wedged in between his dash. He barely looked at me until I signed the paperwork. "You're lucky," he said. "Yeah, I know." "No," he said, glancing at the wreck. "I mean, you're lucky it was them that hit you." I stared at him. What do you mean?" He paused and then muttered, "Some nights, it ain't kids. People see cars out here that don't leave tracks, don't leave pieces behind." He looked up the road. Same bend, same black sky, just as quiet. "You ever hear of a phantom car?" I didn't answer, didn't want to. He could keep that middle of nowhere story bullshit to himself. I grew up in Austin, Texas, back before it gotten taken over by tech bros and $18 tacos. It was a really good place to be a kid, big enough to keep you busy and weird enough to make you curious. I've had the same 3 best friends since 4th grade, Lewis, Matt, and Alex. We did everything together, built forts, played Halo, got into fights with other kids at the skate park. By the time we were seniors, that closeness hadn't gone anywhere. If anything, it had grown up with us. We started drinking together, sneaking weed out of Matt's older brother's room, trying dumb shit in abandoned warehouses. Nothing too hardcore, but yeah, we did experiment. Psychedelics kind of became our thing during that last stretch of high school. Mushrooms in Zilker Park, DMT in a parking garage, you name it, but we were smart about it. Never tripped alone, always had a sitter, and Alex, he was the most grounded out of all of us, usually filling that role. That's what made this one trip feel safe. We planned to drop acid out by Little Walnut Creek on one Saturday. Not at the park proper, but off one of the side trails where barely anybody goes. The weather was perfect, the vibe was right, and the 3 of us were gonna trip, and Alex would guide us. I remember thinking how chill it would be, how easy, something we'll all laugh about later. We spent those first 3 hours laughing so hard that we forgot where we were. I remember lying back on this sun-warmed rock and watching the leaves move like they were breathing. The acid came on smooth, colors stayed steady. No paranoia, no crashing thoughts, just warmth, easy visuals. That kind of buzzing in your chest that tells you you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Matt narrated a full-on soap opera between 2 squirrels. Lewis kept pulling leaves off a branch and comparing them like he discovered a whole new species. I remember feeling like I was made of warm syrup and sunlight. Nothing could go wrong. Alex stayed off to the side like always, legs crossed and watching us. He didn't talk too much, but when he did, it was pure power, just enough to keep us on track. We trusted him completely. He was the best kind of trip sitter, cool, calm, and familiar. But I think sometime around the 4th hour, things began to change. Alex stood up, brushed himself off, and he didn't say anything right away, just looked upstream, then down, checked his phone, then checked it again. Then he said, "Hey fellas, let's start heading back." None of us argued. It wasn't panic in his voice, just something tight underneath it. He was gentle and smiling even, but I felt it, and so did the others. Something was wrong and something had shifted. We started walking single file through the trail. Nobody spoke. I felt my own heartbeat now, loud in my ears, even over the crunch of our shoes. After a while, Alex eventually broke the silence. "I didn't want to say anything out there, but a guy escaped from a facility up the road, a criminal inpatient. My cousin texted me earlier. They think he's walking the waterways." We all froze and looked at the creek beside us. Lewis turned around wide-eyed. "Dude, what the fuck?" "He's probably long gone by now, man. Alex said quickly, but just in case I thought we would probably head out, you know? Jesus, Matt muttered, gripping the strap of his backpack. Nobody ran, but we definitely picked up the pace. Nobody was laughing anymore either. When we reached the parking lot, everything stopped. There was a man wandering around the parking lot. He was barefoot, thin, shirtless, under this open flannel. His jeans were shredded around the cuffs. He had one hand on the top of his head and the other was down by his side. His face looked weird, not deformed or bleeding, just vacant, eyes wide, lips moving, but no sound coming out. Alex held up his arms. "Hey, cool," he said quietly. "Let's just walk to the car slowly, get in, and we're gone." We started walking, but Lewis was still high as hell, squinting at the man and said, "Wait, is that him? That's him right there. That's his name. What was it?" Matt chimed in all eager. "David something, yeah, David. Hey man, are you David?" Alex hissed, "Shut the fuck up and get in the car." But the others kept going, friendly like. "Hey man, it's okay, we're not mad. You don't have to run anymore. You can come with us, okay? They'll help you." At the time, we thought we were helping sincerely. I remember feeling this weird emotional connection to the guy, like he was just a scared animal and we were the ones offering him a way home. In hindsight, we must have looked like the lunatics, 3 tripping kids calling out his name like we were talking to a lost dog. This guy had just escaped a mental facility. He probably thought he lost it when we started chanting his name. The man stepped forward. "Keys, give me the keys." Alex moved fast. "Everybody in the car, now." And then the guy lunged. Matt tripped over a rock trying to backpedal. Lewis screamed. I slammed into the side of the car trying to throw the door open. Alex spun around and shoved the man back hard enough to stagger him. And in that half second of chaos, we all dove into the car like our lives depended on it. The man started pounding on the hood, the windows, then tried the passenger door. Alex reversed in half a second, tires kicking up dirt, then peeled us out of the lot back toward the main road. Nobody talked. Alex did not slow down until we hit a main road. Saw a gas station glowing off in the distance. That soft neon haze looked like a goddamn lighthouse. We pulled in and parked, and then just sat there in the car, catching our breath. Lewis was still shaking, Matt looked like he was about to puke, and I felt like I was still underwater, only now the tide was mean. Alex called it in, told the cops everything, gave them a location, a description, said we had a reason to believe the escapee was still at the Little Walnut Creek trailhead. He kept it tight and clear. You'd never even know he was just face to face with the guy. They found him 2 hours later. He was walking barefoot through somebody's backyard 2 miles north. No fight, just collapsed when they cornered him. According to the report, he'd escaped through a loose utility door at the facility. Walked that creek trail like a regular dude, even though his file painted him as this very, very violent man. I think we were really lucky that day. We didn't hear much more after that, never even got his full name. Never even saw his picture. No news coverage either, just a warning from the cops not to speak publicly, since he was technically a patient under medical supervision and not a suspect in a crime. You probably have already guessed this, but we never tripped again together, and for good reason, I think.